You're listening to Discography Discussion, episode 212, Testament, hosted by Dan Terry.
I seem to have unplugged my headphones. Please hold on.
John Beatty.
Taste the mint. Yeah.
And Joseph Wren.
What is the word people use to describe me? Insufferable.
You know, Chris, nobody really thinks you're this amazing director. They just think that you made a really awesome Batman movie. Does that bother you?
I see. Does that bother you? Sir, you're in my way.
Presented by discussmetal.com. And if you practice what you preach by playing some sweet riffs, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe. That is Dan. That is John. How many years have we been trying to do an episode about Testament, Dan?
3.5 years.
Are we actually going to pull it off this time?
I don't know. Last time we tried to do it, I remember you stopping me and Jeff halfway through the conversation and being all like, you both need to stop drinking, and I'm not releasing this.
And by the way, it wasn't Dan and Jeff. It was just Dan.
Oh, that's fine.
Spoiler alert, might happen tonight.
Hey-oh. There's enough albums for it to happen tonight.
Who's ready for some menthol?
Well, I'm drinking some, wild cherry Pepsi. So
Oh, shit.
Shout out to Lemmy. We miss you.
You know, the good stuff. The Taco Bell wild cherry Pepsi that I only got because I asked for a Dr. Pepper, and they're like, hey, idiot, we're Taco Bell. We don't have Dr. Pepper.
We also don't have potatoes or anything good anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, they're the Actually, when I asked my wife what she wanted for dinner tonight, I was like, you want me to go to Anti-Potato Bell? My wife doesn't eat meat, so she was all about the potato stuff.
I'll leave that one alone.
Yeah, that's fine. I'd be like, why did you bleed me on this? What?
We are married and in sexless relationships.
Cry. So Testament doesn't make me cry. Well, sometimes they make me cry. No, they don't.
Trail of Tears, man.
That's rough. That's really rough. I will tell you, Testament is one of those bands that we're gonna find ourselves asking the same question over and over and over and over again throughout this discography. Why is Testament not one of the biggest bands in the world?
Preach.
They have a musically similar beginning to bands like Metallica and Megadeth. And who else have we talked about? Death Angel. We'll talk about Exodus someday. There's a lot of these bands came, from the same scene. Yet only two of them really got the recognition that I think probably they deserved. Maybe 3 if you want to count Slayer.
No.
Okay, well, John's not counting Slayer. Everybody write that down. Testament was doing all of the things that Metallica stopped doing in the 90s.
And that Megadeth stopped doing well.
Yeah. So, whenever people are like, oh, there's no good thrash metal anymore, and Testament's over here like, am I a joke to you?
I was so pleased when I first discovered Testament back in the mid-2000s.
What?
I hadn't been listening to this band extensively, and I quickly discovered that when I was becoming a new guitar player, that's right, before I was actually able to pick up a guitar and play a song, I was looking at Metallica, listening to their albums, having no regrets, listening to Megadeth, trying to figure out how to play those riffs, how to make that sound. Everything about those albums I was trying to get under my hands. I wasn't paying attention to the fact that Metallica had this dramatic change in the mid-90s where Load was not as heavy as the previous albums. They were just a different batch of songs. Testament is that thrash metal band that plays heavy metal, that doesn't stop playing heavy metal. Everything that you wish your favorite band never stopped doing. Yes, even Slayer fans for that one record that just for some reason had to be nu metal-ish. Testament never quits. So why the hell isn't Testament part of the big 4? But we have to go see Anthrax, Slayer, Metallica, Megadeth. No mention of Testament. Haven't brought that up in a while, but they should fucking be there.
They should be there just for the sake that they were a thrash band through and through. I mean, they dipped into death metal a little bit, but they only dipped into it. They wasn't even if you go and listen to Demonic or Low, it's not like those are death metal albums, but that was just kind of a way of modernizing their sound. And we'll get into it. We will get into it. It's the thing that we do here. But it's just worth noting that everybody out there wanted to experiment. They wanted to expand. They wanted to do different things. Yet Testament is no Slayer. They also expanded. They also did a whole bunch of different things. But they stayed metal, and they stayed true to what the vision of the band was.
They stayed heavy.
They did stay heavy. Yeah, they did.
There's really nothing else for that, is there?
No.
Well, before we go to the bottom of the Mariana Trench to record an episode of this podcast, I'm going to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, then you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. So if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening. And now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
Hey there, all you cool cats and kittens. Dan here, your favorite podcast host, right? Well, I'm going to tell you all about 5-star reviews right now. We do love our 5-star reviews on Discography Discussion, but I think the only podcast app that lets you leave reviews is Apple iTunes. So, get on it. Oh, I'm sorry. This just in. It's no longer called iTunes. It's called Apple Podcasts. Well, that's super creative. I will tell you that leaving us a rating or a review does help, makes us feel better. And if you leave us one, we will read it on the show.
So, Dan, it's time. Tell me about Testament.
Oh my gosh. Testament is a thrash metal band from California. These guys have been around since the 80s. They used to be called Legacy. They love the term Legacy. They named their first album The Legacy. Man, Testament is a band that if you only listen to mainstream metal, you've probably heard some Testament songs. They're not like the world's most underground band. They're not even unsuccessful, despite how we might make it sound in this episode saying why isn't this band bigger? We just mean bigger. We don't mean that they're completely unheard of. What I guess I'm trying to say is if you care about thrash metal, you've heard Testament, and you probably think that they should be included in the Big Four. Although I have to say, why does there have to be a Big Four for just thrash metal? There's no Big Four of R&B, is there? Or pop music or rock music?
Well, at least in pop, you have the King of Pop, which is Michael Jackson, and stuff like that. So they had royalty names back then. I guess thrash being what it is, it decided to go the Mount Rushmore of thrash 4.
It sounds like a decision Lars and James would make.
I do think a lot of this stuff is very self-proclaimed in a lot of ways. I think Megadeth and Anthrax and Slayer and Testament. No, sorry. Metallica, Anthrax, Slayer, and Megadeth all just sat down one day over beers and were like, you know what? We should start calling ourselves the Big Four thrash. Whereas Testament was busy during that time writing awesome riffs and solos. And becoming your favorite thrash band that you didn't even know was your favorite thrash band. Testament's been around for a very long time, since roughly 1983. They have put out an insane amount of records. I didn't even count, but I think it's 13.
It is.
And even including a re-recording of some earlier material with the original lineup with modern production. Which, I'm gonna have my piece about how unnecessary that was. But you guys can feel however you want to feel about it. Chuck Billy, their lead singer, has a very James Hetfield-esque voice, at least on the earlier material. And then as time goes on, he goes into a much more original, more unique to him sort of vocal sound. John, you look like you disagree.
We'll get to it.
Okay.
Oh shit.
Oh boy. I'm brimming with anticipation. Well, I'd say we just start, man. Let's jump into the legacy of Testament.
1987. Sounds like 1987 to me.
Actually, no. I feel like, we've talked on other records about how, bands that have been around this long will do re-records of some stuff. And, I think we talked about it on the Death discography discussion where I was like, did I find a re-record, remaster? Because, this one sounds great for the era that it came out in. And while I do agree it does sound like metal from the 80s, I feel like compared to some of the other records that came out, their contemporaries that we've already talked about, this actually sounds a little bit better production-wise than that. Dan's already touched on this, and I'm already going to apologize now. I have always made no bones. Testament should have been in the Big Four. To me, take out Slayer, personally. They should have been in there. Because if you're talking about when you think of the Big Four, when you think of thrash, it's It's got the gallopy, guitars. It's got great solos. It's kind of a little bit of, it's not quite thrash necessarily as we think about it. It's also kind of influencing what would become death metal and, kind of other things. The interesting thing to me about this record especially is there's at times not much that's really separating this from some of the early, or I should say the late 80s, quote unquote, like glam rock stuff, like the Motley Crues, the Rats, things like that, the Sunset Strip bands, which were not too far removed away from, the Bay Area thrash scene. But this is still in that era that I love of 80s metal, where it's like everyone could fucking play. Nobody in any band that you've ever heard of from the 80s was a slouch. And straight out the gates on this record, they got it. Like, they sound great. They have great production. They have great riffs, great vocals. Like, total package, straight out the gate. 10 to 10. Would buy probably 40 times over because, I'm having to buy a cassette. I'm having to buy a CD when those become a thing. I'm probably having to buy maybe an 8-track at this point. I don't know. And then, maybe I have to buy the LP because, I have to have something for my home entertainment system when that's still a thing people care about. I'm ready to rock and roll and part of every night with my Testament record.
Well, in the 80s, you bought the vinyl for at home and the tape for the car.
Yeah,
I think that was that was kind of the way things were.
You had your pristine version the first time of playing the vinyl, and that's the one you dubbed.
CD works just fine for me.
Well, you probably had your long boxes available at this point.
Oh, hell yes. Those need to come back.
I miss the long boxes where they had to and they had that huge plastic wrapper around them.
They look like the old PlayStation games.
And they had to put it through a very specific machine whose only job was to take those off.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, the legacy is... I agree with you that I think it does sound better than some of their contemporaries. And I'm not listening to a remaster here.
Nope.
I think that this absolutely sounds beefy. I think the drums sound massive. For a debut record for a thrash band, the drums sound absolutely massive. And there's a lot going on here. I do hear what you're saying, John, about it having a little bit to do with kind of more of the 80s glam sort of bands. But at the same time, this is still so far removed, so much heavier and more extreme than what those bands were doing. But
maybe
at the
it's just
same
because Chuck
time,
Billy and all those dudes look so sexy back in the day.
I mean, that could be, man. I've actually got a poster.
Really?
Yeah, dude. I've got a giant poster of Old School Testament, and there's
behind you.
There's some good-looking guys. Well, because I got Godzilla behind me.
Yeah, you can put Chuck Billy next to that.
I could tear down that Avengers poster and put my Chuck Billy picture. Yeah, but the thing is that like they are so good on this debut record. Like, I listened to this and I listened to Kill 'Em All. If you gave me this and Kill 'Em All and said, "Hey, which one do you think is better?" I'm gonna go with this. Now, granted, that's not fair because Kill 'Em All was like, what, 83? So there was a little bit of like, a time that went by. I think Master of Puppets was out by the time this one came out. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's better than Master of Puppets, but it's absolutely this really good middle ground between that kind of more extreme thrash, but still having like a vocalist that would alternate between barking and clean singing. And I think Chuck had a really, really good voice for that. And what I like too is that this one doesn't just thrash a billion miles an hour. If you look at like Death Angel's first record, that thing just a billion miles per hour, and I love that. But the songs weren't necessarily memorable to me. Whereas on the Legacy, they've crafted a very memorable, heavy metal album that can be appreciated by people that are into mainstream metal as well as underground metal. I think this is one of the unique examples where they could please both crowds.
It has the feeling of your fantasy type metal bands like a Savatage, but it also has the riffs and the production of what Metallica was using in the same decade. Granted, this is the debut record. It's less Kill 'Em All to me and more Ride the Lightning, if I can summon Josh for a moment. It has the big drum room sound that those old Metallica records had, but the riffs, the guitars, they're dirty enough. They have that cassette tape sound that I want when I'm listening to metal in the 80s. And there is no doubting the cosmetic similarities to James Hetfield's old voice at that time. If I was a full-on guitar shredding metal fan in the 80s, Testament would have been on my playlist. And I would not have cared how close it sounded to other bands. It would have just been part of the fucking day listening to this band.
So yeah, to quote John, 10 out of 10, you know? Would buy again, have bought many times. And every single time I'm completely blown away.
1988, The New Order.
Did you like the last record? Did you like it a lot?
John,
Somehow
I cannot
even better.
begin to tell you how much I loved the last record. The first time I heard it, it was like listening to classic Metallica, but it was new songs and it wasn't the same band.
Yeah, it's great. For all the jump into the fires and shit like that, we got Trial by Fire. We got Into the Pit. We got The New Order. Eerie Inhabitants kicks off the record in a really great fucking way. The Preacher, fucking awesome. Disciples of the Watch. One of Joe's favorite words, a musical death, a dirge. I mean, it's got everything for all three of us, I think, on this record. If you like the last one, here they are a year later, probably a little more touring under their belt to kind of tighten up a little bit more of what they do, give a little bit more groove to kind of some of their riffs and so forth. Still great.
Does it have a guy having a biopsy analyzed to see if he needs psychosurgery?
Psycho Circus?
He does not. I will tell you this. I think that the New Order, I actually enjoyed the New Order better than the Legacy. It's hard for me to rank Testament albums because I like them all for different reasons. These two albums being kind of the one example of me liking them for pretty much the same reason. Obviously, this is a more tightened up Testament. They're not afraid to be a little bit more melodic. They haven't dropped the thrash by any means, but they are.
No.
They're a little bit more melodic. Everything's just tighter. The songwriting, you can tell they spent a little bit more time on each one of the songs. And let's be honest, like most of these bands at the time, they probably had all of these songs from the New Order done before they recorded the Legacy. But the Legacy was their material that they had kind of been amassing as an underground band before that. So I think that's part of the reason why these albums sound as similar to each other as they do. I think that the production on this record is far superior to that on the Legacy. This band had a really good way of being beefy, even for 80s stuff. Whereas beefy tends to be mostly most 80s stuff tends to be mostly high end, and it'd be about how biting the riffs are. Testament's one of the few bands that, like, even as far back as 1988, has a little bit more beef to their sound. And it may not separate them from their peers yet, but it's going to. Hypnosis is awesome, by the way, and Disciples of the Watch, that's the good stuff.
One of the hardest lessons that every guitar player needs to learn when they're playing metal is to turn up the fucking mids. Slayer gets the credit for always having the mids cranked so that you can actually hear what the fuck they're playing. While Metallica makes decisions cosmetically on each record, how it's going to sound, and then you just have to live with those decisions at the end of the day, Testament makes good production decisions. They don't change the way the record sounds because they want it to sound a certain way this time. And even though this record cosmetically sounds like the last record, isn't that what you want when you're getting a record less than a year later that's a whole new batch of songs that give you the exact same vibe, the exact same feel, and up the ante on heaviness?
I'm going to make one comment about your guitar playing thing. To me, this style of music is all about your fucking whatever your picking hand is, but predominantly as a right-handed guitar player, it's about your right hand. It's about your fucking picking hand. That sets up everything that's going to happen going forward. And these guys have a fucking hell of a picking hand.
Dan, do you want to be heard and understood when giving your opinions on the internet?
I mean, I thought I already had that. Is it not? Have none of the episodes posted?
Well, then you, sir, must practice what you preach. 1989.
I was wondering where you were going with that. Practice what you preach is, I feel like it is an even more tightened up Testament. And the production value on this is top notch. This is one of my favorite sounding Testament albums. And I like that it has a bit of a boost in heaviness over what we'd had before, because now we're living in a post Injustice for All kind of world. This one has bass on it though, so that helps. That helps immensely. And I think that their songwriting really kind of comes into fruition on Practice What You Preach. This record tends to just find a vibe and go with it. The songs are a little bit longer, but they're also a little bit more fun. This is the first Testament album that I can listen to and get a little bit more of like I could party to this kind of vibe from it.
I think that's the interesting thing about, this record to me is, we talk about the Big Four, we talk about some of their contemporaries. This feels like why I think a lot of people, like myself, like Anthrax. It's fun. It's not too serious. I'll definitely say Testament is more serious while having musically it sound more fun. Definitely getting a bit of a, anti-authoritarianism, anti-authoritarianism.
There you go,
lyrics
John.
And stuff like that. And that's, something, I want to talk about and we will talk about moving forward. I know Dan has made plenty of comments about how the fact that I'm one of the few people that's kind of come on as the third person talking about lyrics. This is one of the bands where, I'm not going to negate anything that Megadeth or Anthrax or, Metallica. Sorry, let me try that again.
Megatalica?
Yeah, Megaforce. I'm not going to negate anything that Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, Slayer even, that they're talking about. But for my money, Anthrax is, like I said, they're fun. I'm the Man, Caught in a Mosh, things like that. Not really serious. Metallica, you got songs like Pulling Teeth, all these kind of other songs. Yes, they're kind of more serious. But to me, I've always felt like Testament stood shoulders above everybody else when they're talking about real shit in the music. So this, while sounding a little bit better than, not quite as much as the contemporaries, because we're almost at the Black Album, and we're going to talk about that very soon, the effect of the Black Album on Testament. But to me, this is the next logical step for the band. Practice What You Preach. Great song. They're so far 3 records in, they're killing the intro song to start a record. Like, just couldn't be doing better. And honestly, like, these songs, while they are long, some of these have 4.5 minute long songs, they don't feel like they are that length. Like, by the time you're getting to Confusion, that you're like, oh shit, the record's done? It feels like I just started it. So it's one of those where, like, it's going to be hard not to compare them against the other bands of this era. But for me, still, my money is on Testament. Like, this is one of the ones where I'm like, I don't know why this band isn't in your top 3 at this point if you're comparing the other bands that have come before in thrash. Like, they have everything you're looking for. I think they do it if equally as good, if not better. And the sound is right there. So it's like, why are we not putting Testament right up there with everybody else, if not above?
And it is such a breath of fresh air to get longer riff-driven songs in 2020. Thrash is supposed to be a little longer. Heavy metal, whichever term you want to use to describe this band, they go in both directions between the thrash and the heavy metal throughout their career. It doesn't matter, though. The songs are supposed to be a little longer. You can have riffs, you can have hooks, and you can let the guitars breathe and play a fucking solo, and the song can be 9 minutes long, and no one complains about it. Play it on the radio, and everyone will love it. That's the majority of Metallica songs that people like are the long ones.
The only other thing I had on this record was, and John already touched on it, is I did appreciate the lyrical shift from kind of your like, oh, witches and demons and occulty, just generic metal band crap that the lyrics kind of had been on the previous 2 records. Whereas this one, they kind of like approach it as human beings, as part of a society that they have issues with, which I think is really kind of the heart of metal for me. Is that anti-authority? Yeah, like John said, kind of anti-authority sort of mindset. And you see a lot more of that out of Testament going forward. Well, except for the next album, but we'll talk about that.
Are we ready for it? 1990, Souls of Black.
Honestly, like, this record starts off really good. Like, beginning of the end with like its little, I don't want to quite call it a flamenco-y kind of style, acoustic driven kind of thing going forward, and then straight into Facing the Sky. I think that's the thing about this band that I love is I feel like they're showcasing more influences and styles beyond what they do. Whereas a lot of the other bands, like when you see a Metallica or a Megadeth kind of doing an acoustic-y kind of thing, you're kind of like, but would you really play this style, or is this something that you're into, or is it just kind of like maybe this is what this part calls for to kind of lead into the heavy. The thing I've always loved about Testament is I don't feel like anything they do is not something that they actually are into. It always feels organic. It always feels like them 100%. And this record kind of is trending a little more toward, if we can call it at this point, mainstream. Because at this point, obviously, Metallica and Megadeth and Anthrax are getting a lot more mainstream popularity thanks to MTV and, Headbangers Ball and stuff like that. And again, you're still seeing Testament right there with them. And for me, there's a ton of great songs on this. Malpractice. Fucking love it. Souls of the Black. I mean, every title track they have, I think, a lot of importance, I think, is put on title tracks because you're like, okay, this must be the impetus of why you named the record this. So, like, what are you trying to say? What is this song?
Old school mentality.
And it's one of those where I feel like Testament knocks their self-titled songs out of the fucking park to where you're like, I get it. I understand why this is like why you named a record this, or at least why you have a title track. To me, like this is we're kind of entering, like I said, a little bit more into the quote unquote mainstream sound that this style of music was starting to achieve, but still is uncompromised. It's still Testament. It still sounds like them, and I think it's taking what they've done before and adding to it and doing it as best as they can at this point.
I think Souls of Black is a little bit of a letdown for me, just because like they were on such a progression from the Legacy to the New Order to Practice What You Preach, and on Souls of Black, these songs, while heavy, while sounding good, while still being totally Testament, it's an enjoyable record, but it doesn't move anything forward. And in a couple of cases, it almost feels like it moves back. And I always wondered why that was. So I had to kind of read up on the record to kind of figure out if I'm just being crazy here or if there's something more to it. And what I found out essentially is that the band took a whole bunch of songs that they had like in their demo days and some of their, pre-album material. And they went into the studio and they just recorded that. They reworked some of the songs. They updated the lyrics or whatever to make it fit more into what they're doing now. And I think that it does a little bit, to me, reek of a little bit of leftover material. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that Testament's leftover material is better than all of Anthrax's material. But there's not a push forward in style. I feel like the momentum is kind of lost. So we somewhat plateau whenever we hit Souls of Black. And that's just the music critic in me talking. As a Testament fan, I'll still blare this one just as loud as any other record that they have, because I do like it. I like the ideas, and I also like that it does have a bit of a diversification of style. But I don't think that that's due to exploration or them being inventive. I think it has more to do with like these are older songs and they were still figuring out what they wanted to sound like as a band. So a lot of those different influences are a little bit more on their sleeves. I don't think it ultimately affects the record. I don't think that every band is required to put out a home run absolutely every single time. But, I mean, I can't think of the last time I've ever seen Testament and they've played any of these songs live.
In hindsight, I agree with you. This one sounds like it came out before Practice What You Preach, but for some reason was just kept in the vault for an extra year.
I mean, shit. The output of these guys at this point.
4 albums in 4 years.
Yeah, and like not like oh, we have like 6 songs, we're putting out a 6-song record. Like no, like you're putting out records that are 50 minutes or so and thought out parts and shit like that. And yeah, maybe some of these songs on this record were like B-sides that weren't fleshed out from before, but I still think they're as good or better than anything else that they're anyone else is putting out at this point in this style.
I think that's fair enough. I mean, like I said, I don't hate it, but
you do. Just admit it.
No, I don't. Like it. If I hated it, I'd have at least a 20-minute tirade. You got to be careful when we're talking about these thrash bands. My tendency to go on a 10-minute rant is like 90% higher chance when we're talking about an old school thrash band.
Well, you're saying you have a ritual, is what you're telling me?
It is kind of a ritual, and it is my legacy. So
okay.
1992, The Ritual.
Oh, you mean the Black Album?
Ooh.
You can call it what you want. I think for most people, this is the first seriously well-received Testament record.
No.
I think that is true for the majority of mainstream heavy metal listeners, because until Metallica puts out the Black Album, mom and dad's not listening to heavy metal. They're not listening to thrash. But they are now, and here comes the Ritual with slightly improved or more modern sounding production.
Yeah.
With riffs that are equal to or as good as some of their peers. This has a little more of a Judas Priest vibe, in my opinion. Judas Priest in 1992, I mean. And the drums are a little bit slower, almost like what Lars Ulrich was doing on everything that didn't come out of 1983.
I think the thing for me that like kind of would almost say that you're not entirely accurate with that statement about people, this is the one people will probably like more, is at least on all the media platforms that I've seen this on, there's hardly any songs people have starred on this record that they listen to. So I would say that I would probably stand to say that means that people even now don't really like this record in comparison to the rest, where you look at half of the older records we've talked about, and those are the songs that people are still listening to.
So you're saying streaming services are their own form of revisionist history?
Possibly, but I would say if you were a Testament fan, you probably got this and were like, "What the fuck? This isn't the Testament I like."
I don't think so.
Don't think what?
I don't think that the average Testament fan bought this and hated it.
Really?
I don't think so, because I don't hate it either. I totally get it. Every band that I like that like plays this type of style, like if you look at like all the thrash bands that we've talked about, Metallica, Megadeth, Tourniquet, even. Slayer, like everybody puts out that album where these guys all came from the same scene as Metallica, so they all wanted to do what Metallica did with the Black Album, right? That's rough because
you don't have Bob Rock producing it.
On one hand, you've got the old school thrash fans, but you have to remember what was going on at that time.
Grunge was taking over.
Metal was out, man. By 1992, people didn't care about Motley Crue; they cared about Nirvana. So, and we talked about this too with some of the bands. We talked about this briefly on the Bride episode, as well as on the oh god, what's that band that I made fun of for incessantly
Offspring?
Forever? No, Diamond Head. How these bands, you know, that had kind of come from the 80s, Diamond Head even probably before that. Whenever they realized that people wanted the metal bands to not so much be metal anymore, but to be hard rock bands, like that's how they were going to survive, by blending in. By cutting the solos down a little bit. And so what you get are these kind of like bluesy, hard rock, almost Aerosmith type of vibes from some of these other bands. Aerosmith is a prime example of a band that made that transition. Obviously, I'm not trying to say this album sounds like Aerosmith, but what I am trying to say is that like they had to go in a more rock direction. However, it's still Testament. And I think that's the biggest thing, is a lot of bands lost their identities during this transition. Testament didn't really. They still deliver the goods in the sense that there is still some thrash in here. It's not as pronounced as maybe it once was. But what Metallica did is they were able to stay metal, but still kind of fall more into that hard rock aesthetic. And I think Testament's doing the exact same thing here. And at the time, it was easier for radio stations to play something like this. Whereas if you play something that sounds like it came off of Souls of Black, people are going to be like, oh, what old 80s band is this?
I think the thing for me about this record is like, this feels like an amalgamation of like all of the hair metal bands trying to still do what they were doing, but with like kind of the newer production. Cause you know, I'm trying to remember my Sound City documentary. This is starting to be where people started to go away from tape, and I think digital was slowly kind of creeping in a little bit. But like I hear this and like I feel like the thing that like, and again we're going to touch on Metallica. I feel like this is where you can feel the Bob Rock vibe trying to come through, where it's like you look at the Dr. Feelgoods, you look at the Black Albums, you look at a lot of things that Bob Rock was doing, and I'm even going to use Mutt Lange as kind of a reference between what he did with Def Leppard, Bryan Adams, and so forth. Like, I think you look at those two dudes who learned how to take metal bands, and I'm going to call Def Leppard a metal band because they were at one point more, or a hard rock band, I'll say. But you look at what they did, and they figured out a way to kind of really add that pop sheen to what, metal and hard rock became and was at that point. And you listen to this, and I feel like you can kind of get a little bit of that like Rattlesnake Shake off of like Dr. Feelgood. You can kind of get some of those vibes, some of what Skid Row was even doing at this point. And for what it is, some songs are okay, but by and large for me, like this is like, I didn't get it because this is, my dad listened to a lot of the thrash stuff when I was growing up. So like, I remember hearing this and just kind of being like, what the fuck is this? And not really enjoying it because it just doesn't sound like the band to me. Like, whereas everything else felt like the songs worked and they were well crafted, these just feel like the lowest common denominator type songwriting from this band to capture the sound that everyone's cashing in on at this point. We're 92, so like I think Cowboys from Hell had just come out at this point, roughly, or we're about a year removed from it coming out. So I mean, you're kind of seeing, like I said, you're seeing a lot of these big producers that we all know now, the Terry Dates, the Mutt Langs, the Bob Rocks and stuff, really putting a different spin on what metal and hard rock is. And I feel like that's kind of what this album feels like. And when you listen to the rest of the discography, this is kind of the outlier of the whole fucking thing. It's the only one that sounds like this. And I think that's why I don't like this record as much either, is because when you're listening to it like we have, where you're listening to it from album to album in chronological order, this still feels weird all these years later.
It absolutely does. And it has a cosmetic similarity to Judas Priest in some places. You're not that far away from
record at this point.
I believe Painkiller had just come out.
That's what I thought.
But if you go back in time, you get your Living After Midnight, and this record starts with a song that is not that far away from that. But then you go into So Many Lies. This sounds like the weird songs on Load and Reload. And we're not that far away from those two records. So I almost want to know if Metallica wasn't trying to be Alice in Chains as much as they were just trying to be Testament at that point.
No, I do think that the thing that I don't like about this album the most is probably Chuck Billy's vocals.
Yeah.
Not even that they're bad. They're not bad. Like, the dude's not a bad singer. He's got a good voice. But I think that the comparisons to James Hetfield, a dude had to have gotten tired of hearing that. And I apologize, too, if Chuck ever hears this, that we're making that comparison. But on the early albums, it's kind of hard not to. And I think that, like, Testament was having a bit of an identity crisis on that record. The Ritual is fine, but, like, I miss, like, more shouty, yelly Chuck, and I don't get that here. And so, yeah, I mean, ultimately, I'm like, it's all right if I'm wanting to listen to something a little bit lighter. But I don't know. It kind of sticks out in their discography, but I don't think at the time people hated it. Maybe hardcore metal fans did, but the mainstream acceptance or whatever that liked something like Black, probably would dig something like The Ritual. But to me, it's the least Testament sounding Testament album.
Are we ready for Low?
Please, God, yes.
1994. You don't know Low like I do.
Yeah, so this is a metaphor for Chuck Billy's vocals, right?
I mean, how low can he go? We'll go listen to Demonic. That's how low they go.
Yeah.
Let's slow the tape down and just take them even lower.
So, Pantera was a thing by this time.
Just a little bit.
I don't think you get a record like Low without a record like Cowboys from Hell. You at least not in mainstream metal like this. I don't think the Testament sounds like Pantera here, but the influence of Pantera is now all over metal. Because in the 90s, Pantera was one of the first bands that's like, oh yeah, metal, we play metal. And people weren't immediately like, oh, tons of hairspray, spandex, that sort of thing. Metal started kind of carving out its own identity again in a much heavier, more extreme format. And this is interesting too because what is Metallica follow up Black with? They follow it up with Load, right? Megadeth is they're not at risk yet, but they're heading towards it real fast. Everybody slowed down. The badass metal bands all slowed down and went rock or country rock. And then Testament comes over here and goes, nah, we just decided to sit down and rethink what metal is for this year, and we came up with this album called Low. And whereas I think that Low struggles a little bit in the band finding its footing in this more heavier sound. This is more about the down tune and the groove and all of that, but it sounds good. And this is, I was talking about the James Hetfield, Chuck Billy vocal similarities. That's all gone now. From Low to on, or from Low, that was a Freudian slip. From Low on, Chuck Billy is now Chuck Billy. This is his distinct. This is the voice that you think of whenever you think of Testament.
And he's only going to get more barking as we go on.
Well, what I like too is that because Testament has this kind of 80s background too, they've been writing songs for a long time. They've been a band a long time. So when they write a heavy, so like a brand new heavy band is just going to be heavy. Testament is able to still have vocal hooks and memorable vocal patterns and melodies that I feel like even Pantera hadn't even mastered yet in this year. So these songs benefit from having strong songwriters already that know what a song needs to have in it to be good, while still being able to adopt whatever sound is kind of in vogue that year. And this record absolutely captures that. Dog-Faced Gods is probably my favorite song on Low. And Low was also, for reference, was the first Testament album that I ever heard. So I have kind of a love for that one. I don't think it's their best. At the time I did. At the time it completely blew my mind. And I thought that, like, oh my God, this band Testament, let me go check out all their other stuff. And actually was initially disappointed that the other stuff was more of a 80s thrash, sort of sound. And then I realized that also was awesome and kind of went from there. But like, I think Low is awesome. Chuck's voice is lower. The guitar, the tuning, it's all lower. It's groovy. It's just a great record, and it really, really stands out in a sea of bands that were trying to adopt the more alternative rock, hard rock market. Whereas they decided, you know what, we're going to go ahead and just put our flag in the dirt, and we're going to continue to just be a metal band.
So while I think The Ritual is the first album that everybody noticed by Testament, Low is the first album by the modern Testament. It's the sound that they are going to move forward with. Once they found it, they did not let it go. They tweaked it along the way. But this is your band, everyone. This is the fucking band that needs to be recognized for how heavy they are, how intense they are, how fucking good these riffs are. And Dan won't like it later on, but Chuck Billy, he reminds me of a very young sounding Corey Taylor, mixed with a little bit of your Phil Anselmo and somebody that used to sound like James Hetfield cosmetically on their old albums.
So for me, this record kind of is encapsulating a lot of interest, a very interesting cross-section of hard rock and metal at this point. I definitely hear the Pantera vibes that Dan's kind of talking about. Although for me, I would actually almost say I hear a little bit more COC in this than I do Pantera necessarily. And maybe that's more of Chuck's vocal approach, that I'm kind of leaning more COC than Pantera. But to me, like, this kind of takes what I think The Ritual was trying to do and actually doing it the way I think the band wanted to do it. They just kind of needed that slight misstep to kind of figure out what they really were trying to do. To me, like Trail of Tears, I like this song. I think maybe some people might look at it as the sellout song, but I would say for those that like Cemetery Gates or even, and I might be a few years ahead of this song being out at this point, as a cover anyway, but like Planet Caravan, it's kind of got that socially conscious song. We're kind of leaning into Chuck's, heritage of, and I don't remember what tribe he's a part of, but, obviously he is a Native American or has Native American descendants in his blood or whatever. Low's a fucking great song. I do like Dog-Faced Gods. All I Could Bleed, I think, is really cool. I like the instrumental. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that fucking song. The instrumental song was pretty cool. And, we're in 94 and we talked about the impact of grunge. But I love the fact that Testament still is like, no, we're a fucking metal band and we're going to play solos and we're going to do that and we're not abandoning that. To me, they were kind of one of the few bands in this era that kind of really ushered in the 80s era of metal, and were kind of one of the ones that, like, we're still figuring out where we fit in the 90s and the mid 90s landscape, where you have, shit like Hootie and the Blowfish and stuff like that permeating into your top 40.
They only want to be with you, John.
Yep. Hold my hand, man.
Wait, that song's called Only Want to Be With You?
Yeah.
All I heard was, want to be with you.
Hey, maybe that was the original Mushmouth.
Maybe.
But it's just one of those things to me with this record. This feels like what the Ritual wanted to be and just couldn't for whatever reason. And I think for that reason, that's why I like this record more, because it feels like what this band was trying to do to progress into this new era of 90s hard rock and metal.
How do you think Atlantic Records felt about this whenever they're like, yep, we got it done. You guys want to hear it?
I think they wanted it to sound like grunge or Pantera or something that didn't sound like Testament. That's really what they wanted at that point.
It's definitely mixed. People are very kind of back and forth on Low and kind of going forward. But I mean, Low was incredible. It was mind-blowing. And I'd kind of come on with Low as a new fan. So whenever I heard Demonic afterwards.
1997.
Oh, God. Okay, so Demonic, I thought that a record like Low is like as heavy as a lot of these thrash bands ever get. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you can't really go much further, but like Chuck asked straight up, how low can you go? It's this low. Demonic is, a lot of people like to call it death metal. I don't necessarily think it's death metal. It's not, this is not Obituary or, Carcass or anything like that level of extremity. But this record is a down-tuned groove fest, unlike anything we've heard from the band up to this point. And when those, for lack of a better term, ultra guttural demonic vocals kick in, I'm sitting there like, is that Chuck? That's not Chuck. That's not Chuck. There's no way that's Chuck. It's Chuck. 100%. This is a guy that used to sing songs like "Alone in the Dark." Now it's 1997, and he's like, I was completely blown away by this record. But when people want to talk about like, oh, this is more death metal or whatever, I hear a little bit more of like Sepultura influenced, like heavy percussion, loud. They're not really tribal drums, but I don't know, like just that driving groove force. I guess groove metal is what I'm looking for, but it doesn't have like the cheesiness of groove metal with it. It's darker, it's more serious.
You can say Pantera. I know you don't want to, but this is when the band cosmetically sounds the most like Pantera in every aspect except for Chuck's vocals.
Honestly, and maybe I'm the only one that gets this, but especially on a song like Demonic Refusal, I get some industrial vibes from the guitar tones and so forth. Like, I feel like this is them kind of hearing the industrial, and I guess I could say the beginnings of nu metal kind of infiltrating their sound a little bit. And it does kind of make me wonder, like, I didn't bother to look up any of the tours that they were doing at this point, but it's like, it wouldn't surprise me if some of the earlier bands, the early adopters of that sound, were to be the first to four on a Testament tour. So, like, it does kind of, that's the interesting thing about this band where, and that's the interesting thing about fucking Testament at this point, and kind of throughout their whole discography and their legacy, is at this point, Metallica's put out, what, Load and Reload at this point?
Yes.
Yeah.
Megadeth has put out, God, I don't even know what fucking record they're on at this point. Probably Risk?
We don't talk about that on this podcast, John.
And then Anthrax, this is the era of Anthrax that's got John Bush, so we're going a lot more, like, not fun, like the Joey Belladonna era of Anthrax. This is more the serious era of Anthrax and so forth. So it's like, you kind of got an interesting, the bands that they've been coming up with and compared to are all kind of going in weird different directions, but I feel like Testament's the only one that's going down this direction. Good, Bad, or Indifferent. There are some interesting songs on here, and honestly, Joe, you were making a comment like, oh, maybe this is like where Corey Taylor, sounds like Corey Taylor. I'm going to throw a name out from this record forward that I hear, and it kind of makes me go, I guess this is what this person would sound like on a heavier band. I definitely get some Scott Stapp territory. That mid-range kind of throaty, raspy vocal, that's a Scott Stapp style vocal. And it definitely makes me go, damn, Scott Stapp could probably kill it with a heavier band. Not saying that Creed, the band Creed or what would become Alter Bridge can't get fucking heavy, because we all saw that they can and do, but this would have me go, if Scott Stapp were to find a real full-on fucking thrash metal band, that might be pretty fucking kick-ass, actually.
I would definitely listen to that one time, because Scott Stapp is one of those lead vocalists that I look on as a mashed potato mouth kind of style.
Fair enough.
It's not his fault. It's just that's how he's been made fun of over the years.
All right, so how do you guys pronounce track 4? Is it Jun Jun or June June?
I believe it's the precursor to Gent, which was Gent. So this is Jun Jun Jun.
This is the gentiest song ever by Testament.
Yeah, it should have a D in front of the J's.
It's one of my favorite. It is one of my favorite Testament songs.
Agreed.
It's just absolutely a banger. Like, when that thing comes on shuffle, I'm like, stop what I'm doing, punch some people in the face, let's go nuts. Kind of has a little bit of a Bloody Roots vibe to me. It's got makes me feel the same way as that song does.
How much do you think it cost them to get Craig Jones from Slipknot as the album artwork?
Oh boy. There it is.
The answer to your question, John, I'm seeing a lot of Stuck Mojo. I'm seeing a lot of Strapping Young Lad.
Okay. I don't necessarily know if I would have gone with Strapping Young Lad personally, but I guess they were probably kind of hitting it big-ish right around now at this point.
Yeah, I don't think Devin Townsend was full on into his solo work.
Well, everything's a solo project for him. Let's be real.
So with Demonic, it redefines the band again. This band's gone through, 3 redefinitions so far? Demonic is good. I don't think it's the strongest Testament. I do love the record, but there are times where it's a little slow. It does kind of start to drag towards the end for me, just because it's not thrash enough, and they're kind of missing out on that ultra fast, speedy, in your face thrashedness that they should have.
Wait, did you say they're not thrash enough?
I did.
Oh, well, we should talk about the next record then.
Absolutely. I think we need to resuscitate the next record.
1999, The Gathering.
Dan, you said you wanted thrash?
DNR, baby.
Can I get some heavy metal with my thrash, please?
Dude, this record sounds amazing. And for 1999, when a lot of bands like this were either trying to capture the dying grunge sound, or were kind of going new metal, or whatever style of metal they were trying to do, because at this point now the umbrella has expanded and you got death metal and all that kind of stuff where some bands were going. These guys just like doubled down on, oh, you like thrash metal but with like kind of down tune kind of shit and sound modern production? Is that what you like? Okay, we got that in droves. Here we are. Do Not Resuscitate. Jesus Christ. Down for Life. Whew. Like, every fucking song on this record is great. Riding the Snake. Like, this is basically like, if you like Testament from the beginning, if you fell off for whatever reason over the last couple records because you're like, this isn't my Testament, 1 of 10 would not buy again, you're back on, full on at this point.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like they're like, hey, guys, you remember when we used to play, like, really fast? Yeah. Why don't we do that again, but, like, keep doing this heavy stuff that, like, we did on Demonic? Let's make this happen. And they make it happen. And now Chuck is a absolute monster. He sounds like a monster on this record.
Yeah.
And he's using every single vocal style that he's adopted over the years. It's mostly the grunt, the heavy stuff that we heard on Demonic, but he starts to kind of flex that thrash vocal again, where he starts sounding a little bit more like he did on Low, and it works so well. This record is absolutely like my testament, hashtag my testament. It is the modern realization of what a band like Testament should sound like.
I love the blatant disregard for what was popular.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is basically like, and this is the thing about Testament that's always like shocked me. So like at this point, it's we are in 1999. People are bitching about Load Reload. They're bitching about Megadeth selling out. They're probably bitching about some of the Slayer shit coming out. Anthrax is more or less really waned because people either only love the Joey Belladonna or they only love the John Bush era. There's no middle ground for either of this. this is kind of primo. I don't understand why people don't love this fucking band, because this is what you wanted. If you wanted Metallica to go back to their old sound and they're fucking not, Testament did. They do it great. And it sounds good. Like, so why the fuck aren't you listening to this? And if you, like, it just, this is kind of exactly why I've always said, like, Testament belongs in the Big Four. They belong in the conversation. They need to be fucking bigger. And you're starting to even see in Chuck's vocal delivery and in some of the songs writing the influence of what's going to influence a band like Lamb of God. You can hear it now, a few years before we're going to get Lamb of God. And it's one of those where it's like, I don't listen to whatever any of the other bands that aren't Testament that we've talked about. I don't hear them in any contemporary metal that is getting ready to come out and is moving forward and is now basically bigger than Testament is. So it just baffles me when I listen to a record like this where I'm like, why didn't this band fucking blow up? I guess because they didn't have the giant song, the crossover song. But for all the people who bitched that, well, you know, Metallica sold out, why don't they go back to, like, you know, Injustice or any of that kind of shit? Here you fucking go, dude. Like, why aren't you propping this band up and putting your money behind them?
Because people aren't looking for something else in the style that they like. They're looking for a band to fulfill their creative needs.
And I feel like they even do that. Like, there's nothing about... and that's the thing that drives me nuts about Testament. Are you a musician who wants your band to be progressing and pushing the envelope of what they do? Testament does that. Do you want them to sound good? Testament does that. Do you want a vocalist who can do all kinds of different shit in the umbrella of metal? Testament fucking does that. There is nothing that you can look at in any other band that Testament doesn't provide for you. And they did it first. They were around before all the bands that you like now or have come since. So I don't understand why Testament doesn't have a bigger name or credibility than they should have. And this is a great example of why, like, and I know I'm all fired up because, like, I fucking love this band, and I've always said that this band deserves more credibility and more credit for what they have done, where so many have fallen off. Their contemporaries have fallen off. I'm going to preemptively kind of spoil a final thought, but, like, where your Slayers fell off, where your Megadeths fell off, where your Metallicas fell off, where your fucking Anthraxes fell off, where Death Angel fell off, where everybody fucking fell off. So far, we are one record where we're just kind of like, it was All the other bands we've mentioned have one or two of those at this point, and they're going to put out more of those. So it just is baffling that somehow Testament didn't, like, fucking blue tortoise shell everyone and fucking move forward and you know, just bypass everyone. So I just don't get it.
That's because the blue tortoise shell is bullshit, John. You know it.
You're bullshit,
I know it. And that's something I would love to ask Chuck. Because the answer I know is
Dan could have if he had
everybody
used his other 10
changes because that's what the management tells them to do. I want to know what conversation Testament was having where in 1999 you're losing what's left over of grunge. Everybody's a fan of Pantera or they're going to nu metal. And then Testament says we're just going to be as heavy as fucking possible and as old school as fucking possible. If this was pitched up a couple keys, it would sound like the heaviest Judas Priest, but it's the heaviest thrash heavy metal. It's Testament in 1999. There's no bullshit here.
I don't think that the conversation about what the band was supposed to be for this record had really changed that much since the Legacy.
No.
The times had changed, certainly. You know, the musical landscape was different. So yeah, they're not a band that's just forming now, you know, in 1999 is not going to sound like a band that started in 1987. But if we wanted to ever see what that looked like with people coming in with the same ideas, the same motivations, the same influences, yeah, it's, you know, Joe says it all the time. This is just what Testament sounds like in 1999. It might seem like a dumb statement on its own, but it's absolutely the truth. That if this was the first Testament album in 1999, this is exactly what it would sound like. In some alternate reality, I feel like they would still put out this record in 1999, regardless of what the previous records were. And I guess they also were feeling a little nostalgic for their old material because in 2001, they decided that they're going to, you know, guys, remember how awesome our old material was? We're going to record an album made up of stuff from our first two albums. And hey, we're even going to call the old singer back to do a couple of songs.
First Strike, Still Deadly, 2001.
Fuck yeah, it is. Like, this is one of the few examples of a band going back and basically updating a song or classic songs. I'm all for it. Like, usually you're like, oh, but it's missing like a little bit of that nostalgia or whatever. To me, everything on this, I was like, yeah, I like these better. Like, it still has the same. Somehow they were able to recapture the same vibe of the original recordings, but just with modern production and better sound. And like Dan said, like with the with Zetro back on vocals for a couple of these songs, and you're just like, holy shit, this still works. It still sounds great, and I think I actually like these better because it sounds like modern Testament at this point. So, I mean, they did the thing that a lot of bands try to do and don't succeed in. So this was a home run even for me on this one, even though it's basically a quote unquote greatest hits.
This was the first I had heard these songs. 2003 was kind of when I discovered Testament.
Okay.
And First Strike Still Deadly was the version of these songs I heard first because this is the first album that I purchased. In hindsight, I can give or take re-records. It's not something that I want to exist all the time. It's not something that I frown on necessarily. I think it just depends on when you discover the band, if that's the version of those songs that you hear first, and if you enjoy the most, that's great. Other bands have done it not as clean. If it sounds like shit, it sounds like shit. This does not sound like shit. This sounds like Testament playing their songs again.
I do think that they succeed in recapturing the feeling behind the old songs without compromising their modern heaviness. And I think that a record like this proves that music is timeless. Our recording technology is different. Our expectations for how records are supposed to sound changes. And this record is just a huge middle finger to all that. Like, to the idea of that, thrash metal, in the 80s isn't viable in the 2000s or in the 90s even. Whereas they're like, no, seriously, I don't think you guys realize how good some of these old songs actually are. Because right now, if you're going to see Testament live and they're playing these songs, you're hearing these songs, the ones on the re-record. You're not hearing them the way they sounded back in the 80s. And I think that's really, really important too, because I would say probably the Testament got a lot of fans, from Demonic onward. And a lot of people, maybe they're going to see the band live and the band's playing all these songs that they don't know from the back catalog. And I think that's part of the reason why a record like this exists. We didn't used to live in the Spotify world where we could just, oh, you like Testament? We'll check out all their stuff. I remember how hard it was for me to go back and collect all the Testament albums. It took a long time, of having to find the records in the wild or having to order them from a website or have to order them from a catalog even. And have them sent to your house, or maybe you might get lucky and find a copy in a music store or something like that. So a record like this, even in 2001, is still very. It's their way of updating and being like, no, it's these songs, those ones that you saw live that you didn't know because you haven't been listening to the band since 1987. Here's the best of all that.
And I guarantee this was cheaper to produce than it would have been to repress and release the original records. This one came out on Spitfire. The Legacy was originally released by Atlantic and Megaforce. Same record label that held on to Metallica's masters for a while there. So they were not having the same conversation in 2001 that we would be having today. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I can see why this record was universally panned, though. Because everybody just hates re-records. But this is absolutely like top tier, some of the better re-records I've ever heard. Even being detailed enough to make sure to get the original band members on the re-recorded songs, to just give it that sense of legitimacy. But I also think that, this is also, metal elitism has existed since metal has existed. And I think that there are a lot of purists out there that are like, no, I like the Legacy because of the way the Legacy sounds. I like the New Order because of the way they sound. And those records have to specifically sound like that in order for me to enjoy them. And I can kind of understand that mindset in a certain sense. But I also don't think that you're hurting me by putting this out. I don't think that I'm upset. And as a collector of all things Testament, hey, here's another disc I get to put on the shelf. And I for one love hearing alternative versions of songs, different takes, different ideas. And I hate to say it, this is one of the first time a band's ever done that thing that, you know, you were talking to Dennis and refused about. They actually do make me feel like a kid again listening to these. Because back whenever my expectation was for metal to sound like it sounded in the 80s, you know, I felt a certain way about it. My expectations changed, and here's Testament with those songs being all like, well, let's listen to it through that lens now, you know? And so I think overall it's a good addition to their discography. And I think this marks the very first time we have ever, I think this is the first time we've ever given this much time to a re-record or greatest hits album.
Well, that depends on how long your rant was for the In Flames episode.
Well, that was a little different.
2008, The Formation of Damnation.
Yes, please.
I love the Modern Testament. I'm going to say it just that simply. Testament is the band I point at whenever someone says you can't release a thrash album or you can't really do a heavy metal album in the 2010s, the 2015s, the 2020s. Before Firepower, we got the Formation of Damnation. Fuck you.
So something about this record that I really liked, and something that I think sort of has been missing a little bit on the last couple, is something Dan actually brought up a couple records ago, is the vocal hooks. I mean, you look at a song like More Than Meets the Eye, those big, like, whoa, like, man, like, I can see that, like, I know they're probably not playing stadiums or big theaters either, but, like, fuck, like, that's tailor-made for those kind of environments where you're gonna sit there and you're gonna hear these riffs and you're gonna kind of, like, you know, you can probably see Chuck going, like, whoa, like, you know, like, you get the people clapping and shit when you're doing it.
He's got
too.
His little mini mic stand out there.
Sure.
That thing is so cute.
And, like, that fucking song has, like, wings, motherfucker. That song, like, just goes to another level with that part. Evil is landed. Like, the thing about this is, like, this is a band that just unapologetically is what it is now. Like, they're a fucking thrash band. They have great production. Chuck's got a vocal range that's unlike just about anybody in this scene.
He has all the range.
He has all the range. He can go low, he can go high. And, you know, at this point, I think we're pretty much back to the lineup, maybe sans the drummers at this point, but, like, you know, Alex is back in the band. Like, this is basically the band's band, and I think the era of the band that we think of when we think of this band now. And man, they are just so fucking good. They got slamming riffs, great solos, great vocal hooks, great musical hooks. For a fucking band that's been around this long at this point, we're what, 20 years into a career, 30 years into a career? Like, yeah. God damn. Name me another band that's putting out shit this good this far into their career that I'd say is better than the old shit. Go ahead, I'll wait.
Dan would say
Napalm
Zayo.
Death.
Yeah, okay.
But Napalm Death's the only one I can think of.
Don't forget Zayo.
And the biggest difference, though, is that, like, Napalm Death started off kind of rough and then got better and then got real rough again and then got better. They've stayed better since then. But Testament, again, it's rock solid. I mean, you look at it, like, this band's put out so many records. Then you get a song like The Persecuted Won't Forget. And that song, like, that's just, I'm in, like, pure O-face, you know, through the entire song, you know.
Well, honorable mention for me, the Henchman Ride. Man, yeah. What a fucking killer track.
Killing Season, anybody? I mean, just, you know, whenever people always talk about, like, man, banger this, banger that, everybody's favorite word now for song is a banger. And
Slaps.
They're not, because every single song on this record is a banger, like, throughout. Like they're just, like, one of the few bands that was like, what's the thing that people like for us to do the most? Let's do that 10 times in a row.
Play riffs.
And on top of that, like, what a great comeback record. You know, 7 years removed from basically a quote-unquote greatest hits re-record. And if we're honestly going to say from the last record, almost 10 years from the last full original album, god damn, like...
Yeah.
Again, compared to their contemporaries.
John Beatty is speechless.
This is just another prime example for me where when people go, well, I mean, you know, Metallica did this, or Megadeth did this, or Anthrax did this, or fucking Death Angel, or any of these other bands that they always get compared to.
Metallica released Saint Anger, damn it.
Sure, but, like, I just keep coming back to, like, yeah, but Testament did the Formation of Damnation. Testament did The Gathering. Like,
Testament didn't release Saint Anger, John.
Yeah, but, like, I just keep wanting to go, like, where you can say you hate Load, Reload. You can say you're not a fan of certain eras of Slayer, certain eras of Megadeth, certain eras of any band that came out. But honestly, what band is still just getting this good as the years are progressing and not sounding like they're trying to captured the sound of the era they're in. They only did it the one record, and we already talked about it, and that was 14 years ago at this point.
And that was also the beginning of them actually shifting over into the Testament that we love so much now that we're talking.
Exactly.
Like if they didn't have that, if they didn't take that step, we wouldn't be here.
No.
And these guys they've got the roots, man. They absolutely have the roots to prove it. They've got the years to prove it. They've got dark roots.
2012, Dark Roots of Earth.
More like Dark Roots of Thrash. True American hate. The
Dude, what
hook
a
on
fucking banger.
That song is like such an earworm for me. And the way Chuck just delivers it, like shout, 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 right? And then just pulls out an amazing chorus, an amazing hook. And this is just what this band does to you now. They are so good at their craft at this point that you're starting to realize that, like, oh, this band Testament that we just ignored and listened to other bands that were not even close to as good. Like, now you're playing catch up. You if this is the first Testament album that you hear, you're going to go out and buy all of their other stuff because you're going to be like, who is this band that's better than every other thrash band that's out there?
Well, I think the other thing too that's, been interesting about, I mean, I talked about it earlier, but like I think it's a lot more prevalent on this record. This almost feels like a record that would have came out after literally after 9/11. Because when you look at the lyrics, it seems very much about talking about our global politics, our troops being and meddling in wars that maybe Chuck and whomever else is writing the lyrics don't necessarily agree with. I mean, look at a song like Rise Up, especially. I mean, it's kind of interesting. Like, you can't negate, and I only know this now because of Dan kind of talking to Chuck about the lyrics on the newest record, and Chuck kind of being like, oh yeah, somebody else, wrote a lot of the lyrics. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize Chuck didn't write all the lyrics.
Well, he had a songwriter assist him with composing the song. So it's not exactly that they're written by somebody else, but just...
Well, but I mean, like, someone else in the, might have been like Alex maybe contributed to some of the lyrics. Like, there's other people in the band that I think also do lyrics, and I just kind of never really realized that because this is still at a time where I thought like, well, the singer fucking sings and he writes his own lyrics, and, that's just the way it is. And then you find out as you get older and, documentaries and DVDs and so forth come out, and you're like, oh, actually it's... like in some instances, like, oh, the guitar player writes all the music and all the lyrics and then basically hands them to, the lyricist, and then they kind of work together on making it what they want it to be.
I'm with you, John. Nobody expects the Neil Peart situation, right?
Right.
Sick drummer writes all the lyrics.
I mean, Lamb of God, like, I remember when I found out that Mark writes a lot of the lyrics, I was like, oh, I didn't know that. Like, I was flabbergasted when I found that out. But, that's the thing that's interesting about the time and day that we live in now, where we have more access to the songwriting and being able to see songwriting with these DVDs and so forth, to where you're learning now more about how the band works. And that's kind of the interesting thing about, the era we live in now with this. I love the fact that A Day in Death sounds like it totally would have been something like in the early 90s, kind of has that like 90s bass tone, like something that like maybe even like a Dave Ellefson would have probably played back in the day. Just like really kind of almost maybe a weird reference, but I almost kind of got a little bit of like a Suicidal Tendencies kind of style too from it, where I was just like, all right, kind of like a little bit more of that Bay Area punk thrash kind of scene coming through, and then they just go full on beat me over the head with some riffs, and
that's what you wanted,
again,
right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is a very more politicized record, I think, as a whole. And I had to look back at when this came out, because for some reason I thought this came out when First Strike Still Deadly came out, and I was like, oh, that makes sense. This is still kind of the 9/11 era, but like I said, we're at this point 11 years removed from that. So it was kind of weird to see such a political record all these years later, but then just kind of realizing like, well, I guess like this is still in the throes of I guess probably the tail end of Bush and the beginning of Obama.
Yeah.
So
yeah, this is definitely an interesting record, just in the sense that like they're still putting, again, it's such a huge middle finger to what's popular. You've got metalcore, deathcore, insert other types of core that have more or less taken over everyone's perception of what metal is and what heavy music is. And even some of the other big, quote unquote titans of the industry are, like they're just kind of middling in what they're doing and not really paying attention to heavy music at large. And I can't help but think of that meme, you know, where it's got like, I think it's Thor. And it's got this huge bad guy. And you've got like heavy music in general, like metalcore, deathcore, you know, death metal, black metal, all that stuff is standing there. And it says, "You can't defeat me." And then like Metallica's looking at them and going, "No, we can't." And then he points behind him, "But he can." And then you've got Testament, you know, like it's just, I guess I should make that meme now. But it is still like, they're still fighting the good fight. Is their music absolute fan service of fans of old school thrash and stuff? Yeah, absolutely. But the fact that this again shows that thrash metal as a style is not outdated. It just wasn't recorded that well whenever it came out originally. And that these guys are standing toe to toe with some of the heaviest bands out there, and they're delivering it with such quality that you don't have, like, there's no compromise. You know, a lot of the bands that we talk about on this show, we'll talk about how, like, yeah, they did this, but it was kind of gimmicky, or this band only does this one thing that sets them apart, or this band's a total rip-off of another band. Testament's been around for such a long time at this point that, like, nobody sounds like them. They are their own unique entity unto heavy music itself. I can hear bands that were influenced by Testament, but I don't hear them pulling from really any other source but within. And I think that's really interesting that the records are this good still, and they're still this quality. And it ain't going to stop anytime soon.
Are you ready for it, Dan?
Oh, I was born ready.
I didn't know how ready I was in 2016, but it's finally here. Brotherhood of the Snake.
I want to go first with this one.
Holy shit, riffs!
This, compared to the last two records, this feels like a little bit of a misstep, a little bit of a letdown for me personally. I'm going to point to a song like Blackjack.
You shut your damn mouth, matey.
And just kind of go like, really? This is what we're doing? These are our lyrics, you know. If it's heads you win, tails you lose, it's heads you win in the city of sin. Stakes are high and so am I. Like, okay. I guess that's what we're doing. I don't know. This record was a little bit, I think it's mainly the vocals and or lyrics I just wasn't a biggest fan of, and why I'm kind of like a little bit like on this one compared to the last two. I think musically it's right up there with everything else. I think it sounds great. But I think, like I said, it's songs like Blackjack and a few others that I'm not able to necessarily put my finger on, but there's just something about this record every time I heard it. And I gave it three listens this last couple of weeks. And I just kept kind of going like, this felt like a misstep to me. But it's fine, because the next one's going to go ahead and take care of that for me.
Joe, you want to say something, buddy? You're looking a little looking a little frantic over there.
I think I want to just
TikTok.
turn you loose on this one and say 3, 2, 1, go.
Brotherhood of the Snake is a riff machine. It is a walking. It is absolutely like a riff producing monster on legs. This was so heavy to me when I heard it, heavy for thrash, and I like that Chuck has more or less this is going to sound crazy, but I like that Chuck has kind of abandoned the death metal scream more on this one, and he sounds a little bit more like his classic self. And this is exactly the type of thrash metal that I needed in my life in 2016. Don't want to say I'd kind of given up on music that year, but I definitely, that was like a year before we started the show, or I think we started the show at the end of that year. But I remember, like, with my Brotherhood of the Snake t-shirt, my most worn t-shirt between 2016 and 2019, until it died an untimely death. But I think that, like, this record, yeah, you might think that something like Neptune's Spear is dumb, and it is kind of dumb in a thrash metal sort of way. I don't think that this record takes itself quite as seriously as Dark Roots of the Earth. But I also think that this is where the time sync really, really helps. See, Testament hasn't been in a let's release a record every 2 years sort of pattern anymore. So I think 4 years is the sweet spot for me to have properly analyzed and absorbed the old album. And so whenever I hear Brotherhood of the Snake, it's more of what I like. To John's point, though, I do think that Brotherhood of the Snake, this is the point of the band where they've been doing the same thing consistently for such a long time that maybe it's not as relevant in presenting new ideas as maybe what we'd had before. Whereas I feel like every Testament record up before this was kind of always pushing forward into a certain direction. This is one where I almost feel like they played it a little bit more safe, a little bit closer to the chest. I think if you like if you like Testament as a band, you're not going to have a problem with it.
No,
I think you're gonna love it, especially because you've waited 4 years for this record to come out. So I think in that sense, it is a huge success. And I love again, everybody hates Neptune's Spear, but I love the solo at the end of that song, in the middle of that song. And I don't know, there's just something really quality about this that I can't put my finger on. And I would have said that I thought it was the best modern Testament album. But then obviously they did better somehow.
I agree with Dan. This one's a fucking riff machine. It's 2016. I can't think of another album that sounds like this. Firepower was on the way. Still listening to that fucking record. But before that came Brotherhood of the Snake with its classic sounding riffs, modern production, but the record wasn't being treated like modern fucking metal was in 2016. There are no fucking bass drops here. There is no choir of the lead singer singing 27 different versions of the same song. There's no millennial whoop, damn it. It's just a fucking metal record. How is that a bad thing? Misstep for this band? Compared to what? I get the impression Dan really wants to talk about Titans of Creation.
I mean, I already did. I talked to Chuck Billy about Titans of Creation.
2020.
Nuclear Blast sent me a free copy of the record on CD, and they didn't pay shipping on it. I had to go to the post office and pay for my own shipping for
You're
my
welcome.
free CD. Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, so this record was one of those, now it's 4 years later and I'm, part of 400 podcasts. And so, I remember John sending me a message and being like, hey, they sent us the New Testament record. It was probably like 2 or 3 months before it came out. And maybe it was a month, but I don't remember because I listened to the record like a ton of times. I think I'd listened to it like 30 times by the time I actually ended up, because they sent us the record so that we'd have something to talk with Chuck about for the interview. And this record absolutely blew me away because John was like, hey, you really need to listen to this Testament record. It's really good.
Well, I don't think at that point you knew how much I
time.
love Testament either, though.
What's that?
I said I don't think at that point you knew how much of a big Testament fan I actually am.
No, I didn't. So and so to hear that type of recommendation from you was like, oh yeah, I need to get on that. Don't threaten me with a good time. I'm going to listen to this Testament record right now. And they just blew it out of the water, man. Children of the Next Level being one of the best. Like, this is the crossover single I almost feel like that the band needed. Because the video for this is incredible. I don't know if you guys have both seen the video, but it's done by the same guy that used to do or no, it's not this. I don't know if it's the same guy, but it's made to look like some of those like SNL weird ass cartoons.
The digital shorts.
It's very 90s, yeah. And I love that. It's all about the Heaven's Gate cult, and like it's just metal bands talking about cults, serial killers, witches, false prophets, the Code of Hammurabi. Like, it's so old school in its presentation and yet so polished and so modern in its delivery.
Yeah, for me, this like really encapsulates, especially for a record 4 decades later, this like, I can't think of another band this far into the career. Like, I can't show you the latest. Megadeth kind of is the last one where you can kind of look at Dystopia and kind of go, this is sort of what Megadeth is, like, encapsulates all of Megadeth. But I can't really think of the newest record in any of the bands that these guys came up with where you're like, oh, this is really a great example of what this band has always done. I mean, a song like City of Angels, I think, kind of showcases back to sort of their mid-tempo-y kind of almost, I'll call it a power ballad of sorts, like Trail of Tears and stuff like that they were doing. But still sounds like them. Dan said Children of the Next Level, I think continues, like I said, the band just always knowing how to start a fucking record on the right foot. They always give a great 1-2 punch.
Gene starts on the left, John.
What was that?
Gene starts on the left.
Okay. Regardless. But it's one of those things, like, to me, where I feel like this band has always done a great 1-2 punch for records to really kick them off. They always do that. They seem to pay a lot of great attention to track listing, songs that just flow into one another, either with the solo or the way it ends, and then the next one kind of comes in or whatever. As Dan kind of said, when I got this, like, I listened to it right away because I was like, oh fuck, like we should talk to Chuck for real instead of talking to him about his weed stuff. Which is why I made fun of. This is why I made fun of. God, I don't remember the name of that fucking song on the last record. The fucking Blackjack or whatever the hell that song was called.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things to me, like where it's like you listen to this and I was like, okay, Dan wasn't really on board to talk to Chuck Billy about weed, and I wasn't necessarily either. But I figured if we did well enough with it, it might get us another chance to talk to Chuck about, Testament.
Actual Testament stuff, yeah.
Right. So to me, it was like one of those where I was like, as much as I would have loved to have talked to Chuck and talked a shitload about this record and just the legacy of Testament, I was more like, you know what? I'm going to give this one to Dan because like he had to suffer through the last one and didn't really get to talk about Testament at all. And I think the only question I had asked him was just, and I don't remember exactly how I phrased it because Dan didn't quite ask it the way I would have, which is, I mean, that's why we're different. But it was just kind of the legacy of the band at this point. Like, you're all these decades later and you're still putting out phenomenal material where so many of your contemporaries have fallen by the wayside and you're decades removed from the last good, full-on good record they put out. And this once again showcases why, even on that Slayer farewell tour where you're like, Testament's the first of 5 or 6, roughly, and you're like, why? Why are they? Like, I like Anthrax, but honestly, if we're kind of trying to set the vibe, it really should have been like Anthrax, Testament, Lamb of God, then Slayer.
So when I went and saw that Slayer farewell tour, Testament came out. They played right after Napalm Death, which was, awesome. I mean, I'll take a Napalm Death then Testament show any day. But I remember the vibe. So Testament came out and they rocked it. Like they were. I think some of the people that were there were like not really that that crowd wasn't that enthused with Napalm Death. So everybody kind of just watched it and was like, oh, that was over really quickly. It's kind of like some of my first dates. But I do think that like when Testament came out, they rocked it. I mean, they just absolutely slayed it, and everybody was up out of their seats. They were headbanging. The lawn behind us here at our big amphitheater here in St. Louis, the lawn behind everybody that had the lawn seats, they created a gigantic circle pit in the back, and it was one of those like great moments. Chuck's like, yeah, I see you guys out there on the lawn. I want to know that I see you guys, and it was just this great, wonderful experience. And then Anthrax came on, and everybody was just standing there again. And then a whole bunch of people, the people from the lawn, kept yelling, "Bring Testament back out!" Like, let's get those guys out for a whole nother set, because Anthrax just did not rock the crowd that night. Maybe they were having a bad night. Maybe they were having a bad case of being Anthrax. I'm not sure what the deal was. But yeah, it was pretty clear that everybody would have been much happier just seeing Testament. And then you had Lamb of God after you had to bring out Lamb of God, which is a nice, comfortable, heavy hitter that everybody's going to be like, okay, all right, we can now get properly pumped up. But can you imagine seeing Testament? It just if you remove Anthrax from that equation, it would have been probably the perfect show. It's not a slam on Anthrax, but yeah, that's absolutely what it is. Testament should have been much higher on that bill, and I would have even put Testament right before Slayer. But album sales are a thing, and Lamb of God, of course, they were going to be the band that opened up for the big headliner. But yeah, this record absolutely, and because I had asked Chuck, basically, kind of tried to ask the same question that you asked, John. But I remember saying that like now that Slayer is hanging it up. Do you guys feel at any point that like you're kind of one of those bands that has to kind of keep that torch burning in that regard? And I like what Chuck said, and then he's like, well, and I'm paraphrasing heavily. I mean, I was there, but I don't remember exactly what he said.
Oh, don't worry, you can go to like the PRP or
it was all over the place, and where he basically just said, nah, we're fine with just doing what we do. And I
we're
think
so fucking glad they do what they do.
I think that's the reason why they have this longevity, because he's like we're just comfortable being us, being the songwriters that we are, and so it's not about necessarily the fans. I mean, the fans are there, but it's just more about like we're just comfortable writing songs as us, as a unit. And of course, that's a very politically correct answer, but I think that's why they have such quality, because guys that enjoy what they're doing and guys that, are comfortable writing with each other are going to put out quality content. because they don't have the expectations on them that a super popular band like Slayer or Metallica or Megadeth would have. I mean, and nobody expects Anthrax to do anything. Somebody does. I'm sorry. If you're a huge Anthrax fan, I'm sorry, but I have no expectation for Anthrax.
This fucking record.
And you're done.
Right?
Just
well said.
Just literally leave it at that. Just
well
literally
said.
leave it at that. Just say that.
I
Just,
can't
honestly,
leave it at that, John.
No, you should. You honestly, that should just be your end all right there. Just this fucking record, and you're done. And then final thoughts.
You hear him slam the mic down on the way out.
Final thoughts on Testament. John fucking Beatty.
So I think what's funny is I don't think a lot of people would know how much I really love this band, and maybe this will finally get people to understand that I don't fucking hate the style of music. This is what I grew up on. If you haven't gotten the vibe from me that I think Testament is one of the best bands of this style in this genre, rewind it, start over. Any final thought I could possibly say other than they deserve all of your attention. And if you think that Metallica is the best band because they put out 2 good records 35 years ago, or Megadeth, put out a couple of good records and largely hasn't done anything, and maybe you're not a fan of Anthrax because you only like one era of the band over both, which, Dan, if we ever do an Anthrax one, we'll talk about why both eras are really good, actually. Testament is head and shoulders above everybody. Why they don't get the credibility they deserve, I have no fucking idea. But like I said, start this fucker over, and you'll figure out why real fucking fast. That's my final thought.
I'm going to take this time to talk about Gene Hoagland, the extreme metal powerhouse that doesn't fail, except sometimes when you go and see the band play live and Gene clearly can't hear what everybody's playing. But damn it if they don't follow him.
Can we talk about how great of drummers this band has had over the years?
We can, John.
Nick fucking Barker. Wow, what a fucking machine.
And then Gene Hoagland showed up, damn it.
Paul Bostaff, amazing drummer.
Like, you mean that other guy that was in Slayer?
Oh, yeah, just the other guy. Like,
who was awesome.
And, for those who don't know who Nicholas Barker is, go listen to Cradle of Filth, go listen to Demure Gear, go listen to... Basically, that dude is, like, the death metal, black metal drummer of, like, some of your favorite records that you've ever heard. And he also happened to be in this band. So, again, proving that this band is just full of limitless talent. Jesus Christ.
John,
I just dropped my pen.
Kind of what I'm trying to say about Gene.
No.
He's played on some of your favorite albums. And damn it if he hasn't been transparent in this band. I've never heard a Testament show or a Testament record get hyped because Gene Hoagland is on this. I've heard that about Fear Factory, but I have not heard that about Testament. I know he's there. He's been there since Demonic and Dark Roots of the Earth and Forward, I believe. Not sure if he was on Formation of Damnation. I'll have to go back and double check. But he gives this band everything they need in the drumming department to continue to be heavy fucking metal and play this fucking fast, riff-driven thrash that Testament plays every single fucking record. You can slip a little bit, but you can't fail when you're listening to this band. You're going to enjoy it. And everything that you've heard all of us say about our favorite heavy metal records over the past few years, we can say it about Testament right now. Go fucking listen to it. It's 2021. If you haven't listened to Testament, just pick one and go. Brotherhood of the Snake. Shut your mouth, John Beatty. Dan, final thoughts on Testament.
Do you like thrash metal?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Do you like death metal?
Yay! Sometimes.
Do you like alternative rock influenced grunge music that sounds kind of like Metallica's Black Album?
Yes.
Sometimes.
Okay, well we'll only do that once, okay?
Yay!
Is that cool? Testament is one of the best thrash metal bands out there. And honestly, I'm just going to give it to them. They're my favorite thrash metal band. I think they beat everyone else out, in my opinion. Like, I think that these guys are heavily underrated. I think they've been successful. I think that they should absolutely be bigger and get more recognition than they do. But according to Chuck himself, maybe if they did, maybe they wouldn't be as quality. Maybe there's something about them being the underdogs that makes them so great.
Dan, what's your album of the week?
My album of the week is definitely not Souls of Black by Testament. I'm going new school, Titans of Creation. I had just gotten over listening to that record through most of 2020, and then I kind of gave it up for a while, and then when we did this, I've been kind of latched back onto it.
John, what about you?
Artist in the Ambulance by Thrice.
That's a damn good record.
Talk about riffs.
Talk about unexpected riffs back in the day.
Yeah.
Didn't see that one coming.
Especially with the album before it.
Well, for me, it's not a record, it's a documentary. John mentioned it on a previous episode, and for some reason, it's on YouTube. Go and search for that. Maybe I'll even put a link in the show notes. But a band called Death, before there was punk.
Good documentary.
Is it fucking true? Were they fucking doing this shit before punk was a thing?
They were the shape of punk to come from the Motor City.
Take us out, DFT.
If you like listening to our podcast and you want to be more involved in what bands we pick, you can absolutely do that. There are so many different ways you can reach out to us, it's not even funny. Don't laugh because it's not funny. You can reach out to us on Facebook at facebook.com/discography discussion. You can find us on Instagram at discussmetal, on Twitter at discussmetal. You can even send us an email at danandjoeshow@gmail.com. You can follow us on YouTube. If you look up Discuss Metal Dan, I will be there. There will probably be a link in the show notes you can just click to. Make sure to subscribe to get updates, to see interviews early, see episodes live streamed, and it'd be a catch-all for everything that we do, be it discography discussion, brutally speaking, you name it. It will absolutely be there. If you want to get some sweet discography discussion merch, you can go to our Teespring store. There'll be a link in the show notes that'll take you right to that store. We've got some comfy socks, some comfy t-shirts, some comfy coffee mugs. Bet you didn't know you could wear a coffee mug, but you absolutely can with some duct tape. If you want to join us on our Discord server, where we are chatting with fans of the show 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as long as we are awake, there will be a link in our show notes that'll invite you right to our Discord server. Guys, if you've not been checking out Patreon is where it is at right now. If you come on at the True Discuss Metalhead tier, which I believe is about $10, it's not about, it actually is 10 exactly. We are doing hangouts. We just had our first Patreon only hangout just recently, just last week as of when we're recording this. It was a lot of fun. That is just a one-on-one, or I think in this case it was like a 3-on-3.
It was definitely a cage match.
Chatting with our True Discuss Metalhead. So if you want to talk to us directly face to face, that is the way to do it. If not, totally understand. We are always available to talk to you on our Discord server. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and there will be many to come.
And on that note, this has been episode 212 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion. And please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks.
Give me your dark roots of cash.
$1 a month gets you into that exclusive album review feed.